Hi, welcome to Arthur's online autism presentation. I am Arthur Riley and I am on the autism spectrum. I will discuss on how my mother helped me overcome many obstacles to where I am today. Before I go any further, in case you hear something you disagree with, I am giving my life story and perspective. I was diagnosed with autism at age 4. I am 57 now, so you can imagine how limited the resources for autism was back then. But mom's concerns started long before that. She noticed early on that no eye contact, did not interact with others, and minimal verbalization except parroting a few words. In the beginning, she was not concerned. However, when I reached about 3 years old, I still wasn't speaking. The neighbors had a son about my age speaking full sentences. So I got the feeling that mom was convinced at that point that something was wrong. So she took me to my pediatrician, who then became very concerned. So he referred me to a specialist. Specialist concluded I had autism, mental retardation, or maybe a combination of both. At that time, mom had not a clue what autism even was. However, she knew that I was too smart for mental retardation. Sadly, the doctor offered her no advice on how to deal with my situation. So she went to a local library to learn more about autism. Food was used as tools for me to speak. Mom knew that I always had a love for food. Still do today. Some things over the years, nothing changes. She remembered taking me to a fast food place and had me go up to the window to order for myself. At first, she stood a few feet behind me in case there was a problem. However, it was imperative for her that I learn to order on my own. And the same held true at a regular restaurant. I remember her reminding me to speak clearly, look the server in the eye, otherwise, I may not get what I wanted. And at home, I had to speak clearly to get what I wanted. For example, my mom remembered many years ago if I grunted or pointed at desired items, she did not respond. She insisted that I learn to speak because she believed that I was capable of learning. Plus, she remembered I loved spinach and hated peas. So she remembered going, Arthur, what would you like for dinner? Spinach or peas? If I did not answer, guess what I ended up getting? And she used a soda can to help me say please. It was either a Coca Cola or a Pepsi can, one of the two. So, anyway, my mother remembered me taking a soda can, shoved it right up to her face, grunted, then she opened it for me. Finally, she decided something needed to change. So one day she said, Okay, Arthur, I'll open it for you if you say please. Not only did I refuse, I had one of those screaming and crying fits that lasted seemingly forever. However, mom stuck to her guns, bit the bullet, and sure enough, the next morning I said, Please. So I believe that no child is too young to start learning good manners. Then I started speaking a few words at age 5. Sound more clearly, huh? Well, that's the information I remember getting from my mom when I was old enough to understand. She picked me up at school one day and noticed a big orange stain on the front of my shirt. I can imagine her thinking, Oh no, now what? What happened? However, she remembered me pointing to that stain and saying, Spaghetti lunch. Oh, she was so excited. She goes, Ah, he spoke. Back then, hearing me verbalize anything was music to her ears, especially when they're nice, clear, concise words. And if I remember right, she said I started speaking maybe short sentences at age 7. Well, anyway, she felt sense of hope. I'm going into private school and home education. Back in my early years, my prime of autism, finding the right babysitter or school was hard to come by. I could deal with my situation or had the abilities to. So finally, she found a private school that had experiences with behavioral issues, and the owner had a son with learning disabilities. So I imagine mom felt she struck jackpot with this school. And better yet, it was located around the corner from where she worked. So her plan every day was to get off work, pick me up at school, get me out of there as fast as possible. So nobody could go up to her and say, "Oh, sorry, we can't take him anymore." I don't believe she could bear to hear those words one more time. No way. So one day the owner caught up with her and said, your son has a problem. She goes, "Yes." I can imagine that she felt the roof caving in, probably tears just rolling down her eyes. She was sure that she was going to hear the owner say, "No, sorry, we can't take him anymore." However, the owner asked her, "Would you like us to help him?" She goes, "What? What? You can help him?" And I'll bet those tears of sadness suddenly turned to tears of joy. If I remember right, she can only afford to send me there 3 days a week in the beginning. However, it was worth every penny to her to make sure I got the help that I needed. And she reinforced my education at home. She often asked my teachers, "How can I help Arthur at home?" Believe me, they had plenty for me to do. I'll admit some days more than I bargained for, but effective nevertheless. I remember working on some of my letters, started writing part of the A, the small A. One third of the A, my mind would wonder. I remember mom saying, "Arthur, what are you doing?" She's having her way of redirecting and helping me refocus. It took me out in public instead of sheltering me, which I believe was a key to one of my success. About age 7, I remember her telling me I had autism. At the time, I thought nothing of it. However, many years later, I look back and got the feeling she felt it was important I learned the truth about myself. She noticed that I had a gift for calendar, dates, numbers. She remembered taking these big, thick phone books that we used to have, the telephone books. I'd say they're about this thick. And I studied calendars seemingly endlessly. She said it kept me busy for hours. So she used my gifts as conversation when we went to other people's houses. For example, I remember her asking me, May 3rd, 1973. I gave the day of the week with no hesitation, and I never missed. Also, she asked me a couple of times, "What did you have for lunch a year ago today?" And surprisingly, I remembered a few times. Can't do that now. However, I felt a big boost in my self esteem, having all these adults amazed and impressed with my abilities. About the same year or so, my mom enrolled me in a movement education clinic for children at Fresno State. It was a PE or physical education program. It was run by the PE professor. College students taught the skills, basic movement and athletic skills. And their belief was movement helps children in other areas. Better yet, the professor had a daughter about my age. Sweetest young lady. Her name was Kelly. Many years later, Mom and I both agreed that Kelly was one of the keys to breaking me out of my shell. She was one of those peer friends that says, "Come on, Arthur, let's do this, let's do that." Took me by the hand. We're both skinny young kids with blonde hair and toothpick legs. I remember how petrified I was being enrolled in this clinic. However, I discovered I had some pretty good athletic skills, which boosted my self esteem. So at the end, I was looking forward to going. So it was a very positive and beneficial experience for me. At private school, one of my gifts was spelling. For example, if the teacher gave me a test of 100 words, I could spell all 100 of them correctly. This was used as a tool to help me deal with the bully. I don't remember this, but my mom does. In fact, the teacher told her this story when she went to pick me up. Said that one of the bullies, his finger, traced it on the back of my shirt, says MR. Mental retarded. He and his friends got a laugh over it. Teacher saw it and decided to give just us two boys a spelling test of 100 words. Knowing what a gifted speller I was, she knew her plan would work like a charm, and it did. But to no surprise, I spelled all 100 words correctly, while the other guy missed 88 of 100. So she showed the test scores to the rest of the class and explained why she did it. Her point was we all have our highs and lows. In other words, the other young man had trouble spelling, but did well in other areas, so it was a valuable lesson. Another thing when I was in private school or home education, mom taught me to always have respect for authority, such as teachers, police, other parents, babysitters, or, or adults in general, or older teenagers who are babysitters. Then she said, I must do what they say, even if they're wrong. And field trips are one of the keys to my success in private school. It was wonderful getting out or any break from the classroom or school, getting out in the community. Some examples was here in Fresno, Pepsi Cola factory. I still remember us all enjoying our free samples. The zoo, the police station, the foothills surrounding the Fresno area, walking to a nearby shopping mall, and the bowling alley. The bowling alley got me interested in bowling to the point where my mom felt if I learned a skill and became good at it, it would enhance my self esteem. So a couple of months later, she enrolled me in a bowling league. I will discuss that more in detail at a future presentation. So, as much as I enjoyed the field trips and as important as they were, I knew all along that they were privileges, not rights. I knew that if I misbehaved or made bad choices, I could very easily lost my privileges to go to the field trips. If my mom found out about it, she would have said to me, well, too bad, Buster. Next time you're going to make better choices or listen to the teachers, right? In other words, she would have backed the teachers 100%. She believed that I must be held for my actions or accountable for my actions. Going into public school, my first year was age 11 in the fifth grade. 3 months before that school year, mom took me to a local hospital and had me tested by a psychologist. After the testing, he felt I was ready for public school only if I had the right teacher, who was handpicked throughout the entire Fresno Unified School District. I was small for my age back then. I weighed 65, maybe 70 pounds at the most, which unfortunately made me a prime target for bullying. Teacher sensed that, so within the first 2 weeks of the school year, he assigned a tough classmate to watch over me. And it worked like a charm. Not anybody laid a hand on me thanks to my friend that it was assigned to me. However, I had other issues such as ridicule and teasing due to the fact that other students did not understand. I made matters worse by responding to their insults, getting angry, agitated, not realizing at the time that my reactions played right into their hands. Other issues I had were looking suspicious due to my actions. One day, when I was about 13 years old, I was asked to leave a convenience store for looking suspicious. I remember that day like it was yesterday. It was back in the time when Pop Rocks first came out. Anyone doesn't know what they are, there are little candies packaged in the envelope or same type that you put flower seeds in. Little tiny candies with different flavors. Each piece is filled with carbon dioxide. So the purpose was put them on our tongues. You feel that crackling like this. You got that, put all those pieces of candy in. I love the crackling sensation they had. So that one day, I looked seemingly forever for Pop Rocks, couldn't find them. Worse yet, I didn't ask the clerk for help to find them, which probably made me look even more suspicious. So, about 15 to 20 minutes later, I was asked to leave the store. Needless to say, I was just crushed. However, when I related this story to my mom, she said to me, "Well, you have to understand, store clerks have jobs where they have to protect the store and be on the lookout for anything that looks suspicious. Next time, do not take so long at the store. Plus, ask for help if you cannot find what you're looking for." About 2 years later, my ninth grade woodshop class, I could tell by the way my teacher looked at me and his demeanor that he noticed some of my remaining autistic traits. So instead of getting angry, I decided to stay after class one day and explain my background with autism to him. Thankfully, he was very receptive and apologetic, which I really appreciated. However, when I related the story to my mom, she said to me, "Well, you have to understand, shop teachers have very tough jobs to be on the lookout for anything that looks suspicious or students that come under the influence of alcohol or drugs, and especially with all those machines in there." In fact, a couple of months later, instructor told our entire class, he said, "I'll never forget this words. I think that you're under the influence, and if you smell like a brewery, you are out of this classroom. No questions asked." With all those machines, I couldn't blame him one bit. So the two episodes which I mentioned, I believe, gave me a better understanding of individuals who have little or no knowledge of autism. Another issue that we had was comprehension and reading, so I had difficulties in some of the subjects. Mom, bless her heart, she bent over backwards to help me whenever I needed it. However, there were times we both got frustrated. She went over certain subjects a few times, I still didn't get it. So her solution was to hire a tutor to come to our house once a week, help me with reading and comprehension. Oh, I felt she was a godsend. So did mom. Tutor encouraged me to watch the news, write down any words that I did not understand, plus learn new words, find ways to use them as sentences. Then she encouraged me to pick an article from the newspaper and we go over it. So not only did this help my comprehension and reading, it expanded my horizons. What mom was really impressed about her was tutor, she never lost her composure. No matter how many times she had to go over something with me, she never lost her composure. So, once again, I believe she was a godsend for both of us. Going on to high school, this was my sophomore year. I was 16, and I finally learned that people do not like to be ignored. So, for the first time in my life, I felt comfortable around my peers, or more comfortable. I had this attitude to spend time with the ones who accepted me for who I was and not waste time with the rest. About a couple of months later, the owner of the private school asked me to come and make a presentation to other parents with autism, probably teachers. So mom came with me. And if I remember right, this was hosted by Autism Society. I believe it's Fresno. So it was really gratifying, offering hope to parents who are just looking for answers, just at that point where they just didn't know what to do. And a few months later, when I was having some bad days, there were things going on at school, mom remembered or reminded me about how my presentation could have been a lifesaver to some of those parents looking for answers. The one thing I'll never forget about the presentation, I noticed about 4 or 5 high school or college students sitting there with pen and paper taking notes. And I thought, wow, what a compliment. So a couple years later, when I was graduating from high school, I learned why people ridicule or bully others. They do it to cover up their own insecurities. Now, all of us, I bet, know at least one person or dealt with one person who felt like they have to put down others to make themselves look smarter. Doesn't that sound familiar to you? So, a few months later, after graduation, I started Fresno City College. First thing I noticed within the first 2 weeks of the semester, about 95% of my problem peers were gone. First time in my life, I really felt comfortable around my peers, despite a few episodes of ridicule. So I was really in heaven my first semester in private school. Enjoyed just socializing with everyone. However, my second semester, I had this F English class. I still needed room for improvement on my reading. Not only that, writing, comprehension, composition. I had this tough English teacher who embarrassed me in front of the other students. However, I knew that my background with autism had nothing to do with it. The teacher was the same way with everyone else. So it was nothing personal. However, I still did not like it. My mom, she related to the frustration I had. I got the impression she agreed with me in some respects. However, when she read one or two of my compositions, she just shook her head and said, "Whoa, I wouldn't pass this." I remembered one in particular. It was handwritten and grammar left a lot to be desired, and I split words in the wrong places. Then going to my English teacher, she said, "Well, in that respect, I can see his point." So I managed to squeak a D out of there. However, it meant I had to retake the class. So I retook that same English class a year later. However, I took it the second time. The difference between the second and the first teacher were day and night. We all loved him. Great sense of humor. So one of my compositions was entitled Dealing with Unfair Judgment, talking about my experiences with autism. The teacher was so touched and impressed with it, he read it to the entire class. Plus, he said that he read it to one of his colleagues over the phone that he knew for 40 years at the time. So, what a compliment. Despite the fact that he did not mention my name, some of my classmates knew it was me due to my facial expressions giving me away. Once again, talk about a big boost to my self esteem. I still had room for improvement on my writing skills. However, that composition that he read gave me a big boost of confidence, made me believe that with certain subjects, I can write better than or better or some people. But once again, depends on the subject. So about a year later, I went to Fresno State, enrolled as a PE major. However, a year later, one of the classes I enrolled in was Movement Education Clinic for Children. Ah, the same program that I was enrolled at as a student many years before. What a gratifying feeling giving help to this, and the same help that I was given many years before that. Very rewarding. I was convinced that special needs was my calling. So I got my BA in adapted PE, and I managed to get through the credential program. However, I was unable to find a position after searching 2 years, so Mom and I agreed it was time to consider other career options, which leads to Las Vegas. Well, first, I'm going to mention my first visit was at age 21 and loved it for many years. This is back in the 80s. I loved all the lights plus the hotel room and food bargains. Before I go any further, Las Vegas was a whole different town than what it is today. For example, many buffets were under $5, and I'm talking about the dinner ones. I was able to get rooms for 140 a week. Now, most of them, you pay more than that for one day. So sadly, all the bargain days are gone, or most of them anyway. However, during one trip a few years later, still in my 20s, I learned the hard way it does not pay to argue with security, which I will discuss in more detail in a future presentation. So when I was 28, I moved to Las Vegas and I learned how to deal craps and blackjack. Went to a casino dealer school. However, first lesson I learned was cannot take things personal. So once again, I dealt craps and blackjack for 12 years. One of the things I loved about dealing was meeting people from all over, asking where they're from. I really enjoyed that part of my job. As a result, I was awarded Employee of the Month in May of 1996 for my outstanding customer service skills. I also had 2 years' experience as a supervisor. Despite my success, I was still misjudged occasionally, but a positive experience overall. Now I'm going to talk about moving back to Fresno. Well, the events that led to it was after dealing or being in the casino business 14 years, I decided to give education another chance. So I left my dealing job and became a substitute teacher for special education in Las Vegas. I love the change. However, I didn't plan or take into consideration the decrease of income when making a career change, which resulted in me being in dire financial situation. Plus, I learned the hard way. Only use credit cards for emergencies. So, unfortunately, I had to move back to Fresno. I was self conscious about that for a while. However, I learned to move on. Now I only use cash and debit cards. I also learned the hard way to consult with either my mother or someone else I trusted before I make important financial decisions or signing important financial documents, especially with a significant amount of money. Another thing I learned through all this experience was if I don't have the money for something, I do not get it. Period. No questions asked. I'm going to talk about My experience with an autism clinic here in Fresno, plus ABA, which stands for Applied Behavior Analysis. My first contact with them was over many years ago at a Fresno Grizzlies game. At that time, they were a AAA affiliate of the San Francisco Giants. So I approached their booth. I talked about my background with autism to them. After some conversation, we all agreed it would be a good idea to visit the clinic, check it out, share my experiences to the staff and students, which I did a few months later. And a month after that, I became a volunteer. So the following year, 6 months after that, I was a part time one on one behavior therapist for children with autism, along with substituting. Plus, I took 11 units of applied behavior analysis at Fresno State. I was a member of a nonprofit autism organization for 8 years. Plus, I've been a volunteer coach for the Fresno Junior Grizzlies. Anyone who's not familiar, the Junior Grizzlies are a non competitive baseball league for special needs, ages 4 to 22. Sadly, the last 2 years were canceled due to COVID. So hopefully, we can resume that next year if they can get the new strain of COVID under control. So I'm praying and keeping my fingers crossed. Now I'm going to give my perspectives of that autism clinic. I like the social skills that being taught, such as turn, social interaction. When it comes to playing games or competitiveness, some had issues being a good loser, lost some. I had that same issue when I was their age, so I could react to that. I mean, not react, relate to them. Then during therapy, clients or children were given opportunities to work for desired items. For example, one wanted iPad or tablet, which showed videos. Example would they would do 10 tasks. So each successful task, they'd use an icon to mark it. So they use 10 icons, which means successfully completed 10 tasks. They get iPad for 1 or 2 minutes, depending on the student. And when the minute or 2 minutes are up, they shut off the iPad and start the process all over again. I love the idea of children or students having opportunities to work for something they really want. And I like the basic life skills being taught, such as haircuts, making sandwiches, tying shoes, using microwave. Maybe some could cook, depending on their skill level, and make sure there are no safety issues. One reason I brought up haircuts was mom remembered many years ago during my peak years of autism. She tried to get me to the barber shop for a haircut. I did not cooperate, started screaming and yelling. Finally, the barber shook his head, says, "Nope, sorry." Well, mom thanked him anyway for at least trying. One activity the supervisor used with one client took the electric hair trimmer, which barbers and hairstylists use, put it on his head, get him used to the feel of it. But they left the hair trimmer out. No hair was cut, but at least he got to feel the hair trimmer, get him used to it. So when he went to the barber shop or hair salon, it wasn't a big shock to him. So I thought that was clever. One, going back to social interaction, I remember personal space, your bubble. For example, some students were asked to put their arms out and close it, their hands in front of them. That's the bubble. That's how they were taught to figure out or get the concept of personal space. So I'm now going to talk about my long-term substitute assignment I had 2016, which is about several months. Best the highlight or the best part was I was awarded Employee of the Month in June 2016. I realized it's an honor for anyone to get Employee of the Month, especially for a substitute. Many people agree that I would be a good teacher with my background and skills. However, I believe it's a good idea to look into being a motivational speaker for individuals with autism, parents, and teachers. In fact, several people who heard my presentation suggested I look into that area. Be honest, I love the idea. If I could make a livable wage, I would consider it. So I'm doing more research and looking into it. If I were change fields completely, not working with special aid needs, or I would love working with dogs or cats. I've been a cat person my whole life, so I love animals once again. However, my career change would never change my compassion for special needs. And most of you, or some of you, are aware of the fact that I have a online autism support group on Facebook entitled Arthur's Autism Support. I've given online presentations on Facebook through them. So, regardless of my career choice, I would always be involved with special needs one way or another. So going to events or doing presentations, any way to be involved with special needs. Well, if you like my presentation, please click like. Next one will be about bridging the gap between autism and police/security officers. Thank you very much. Have a good day.